Yo, what's poppin' everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Zach Lesage here. Today we're going to be going over the top 10 best decks heading into Toronto Regionals, and of course any local events or anything else like that. With this being the last major event in our Pokemon 151 E-Block on format, this is likely going to be the last top 10 best decks of this format, so it should serve as the best decks in this format. They are positioned towards how things should be played and stuff like that towards Toronto to some degree, based off the recent results in Lille, Sacramento, Peoria, and more. But I hope that everyone enjoys this video. Give this video a like. It does really mean a lot when you like these videos. Share these videos with your friends. If you see my tweet on Twitter, retweet it. All that great stuff. And let us know in the comments below if you think this list is right or not. Or just be like, yo, love the videos. All that stuff really does help out a lot. The lists are going to be available in a pinned comment below in the comments. So check out that if you want to copy and paste it right into PTCG Live. That being said, we will catch up later, and let's jump into this number 10 deck. Want to support the Shuffle Squad? Be sure to check out all of our sponsors in the description to pick up Pokemon TCG singles, sealed, and PTCG live codes. Rapid striking its way into our number 10 spot is Rapid Strike Urshifu Inteleon. Now, this deck has kind of seen some success, whether it's Cyrus winning NEIC, but we're talking a few formats ago at that point. And I think right now in our current format, this deck is trying to beat Gardevoir and trying to beat Lost Zone Box for a lot of the points. And I mean, Arceus is coming back a little bit, so that's something to consider as well. This deck does seem to struggle against a lot of other decks in format, like Mew and Charizard and Lugia, which are also all decks within this list. So I do think that this deck is good, and being able to spread damage counters around to your opponent's Pokemon and take extra turns with Medicham is good. This deck's a little bit of a high risk, high reward play. It's good enough to make the top 10 decks list, and I think it's good enough to maybe even spike a top 8 spot or a top 16 spot, as we saw with Victor Ong, and this is actually their list from Sacramento. If you hit any of the Lugias, which I think Lugia is going to be a top deck in the room, or Mew after winning Lille, or Charizard, which just happens to be a top 5 deck in format in terms of play, you might struggle, and I think that's really where this list is. If you're hitting those Lost Zone Box decks, you're probably having a good day. But we'll see. I think it's really one of those things where you got to be bold to play this, but it might pay off. Here we have Mew that is fusion striking its way into number 9. It just won the regional championships in France, and here we're at. It was the Fusion Strike build, not the Grabber Mew list that Rowan played, and this is my current list for Mew VMAX with Fusion Strike Pokemon. Ice Cube might be good, or Choreo might be good, but the whole strategy here is to be copying our attacks with Cross Fusion Strike, drawing cards with Genesect, and really ripping it up. How did this deck win? Maybe players didn't respect Mew enough in the EU. Maybe they did, and it still just got through. Mew's one of those decks, similar to Rapid Strike Urshifu, where they don't always have the best matchup, but they can sometimes sneak through the cracks or just do things. Turn 1 knockouts with Meloetta is a thing. Deoxys can sometimes answer Lost Zone Box decks, and not a lot of people test against Mew anymore. So while Mew might be on its way out of the format once we have a rotation that's still unannounced, I think that this deck it's not great nor bad. It exists in the format, and I think it exists slightly better as a more consistent play than the Rapid Strike Urshifu, which is why it's at number 9. I can't put it too much higher, even though it just won the regionals, due to a lot of poor matchups towards the top of this list. So we'll keep it at that. Also, I do want to let everyone know, if you are trying to get any of the cards for the decks in these videos, we do have sponsors at deckoutgaming.ca, AtlasCollectibles.com, and PTCGOstore.com. We have discount codes available in our description to save 5, 6, 12% on your sealed singles and PTCG live codes. So check that out in the description to support the Shuffle Squad as we kind of go through this video. And I mean, pick up some cards. We all need more cards, right? I know I do. So pick up some cards. Skyscrapering into our number 8 spot is Arceus Duraludon with Mawile. Now, Braden Elfert is an Arceus mastermind, and as a player that loves Arceus myself and saw my greatest peaks last season with Arc Duraludon, this deck has me like, ayo, should I play Arc Dur this weekend? And I think a lot of other people are doing it as well. I think Arceus decks, Arc Piles, Arc Vulpix, Arc Pika, Arc Tina, all these decks are really seeing a little bit more play because they are strong path judge decks. And that's something that's really good in a format where Lugia and Lost Zone Box are seeing success. This is something that we saw last season when Lugia and Lost Zone Box were seeing success. Arceus really was that number 3 deck in the format. There's some things here that I like about this list, like having Duraludon against a Lugia deck, having Mawile against some decks that could get Tempting Trapted. There's some really cool cards when it comes down to this deck, and I think that it's a deck that people might want to consider. I really don't think it's a bad choice, and as we kind of go throughout this format, this seems like a really solid deck. So shout out to Braden for coming up with this concept. I think that this deck still might struggle against other random decks. Like, I might not want to play a Miraidon deck against this. I might not want to necessarily run into a Mew deck when I run into this, which is why some of these decks exist on this list as well. But if you're hitting Lost Zone Box decks and Lugia decks, it sounds like you're probably having a good day. So solid choice on Arc decks for this weekend if you are able to dodge some tough matchups. Burning Darkness at number 7 is Charizard EX. Now, Charizard EX has kind of fallen a little bit this week. I don't necessarily think it's a bad choice going forward. I mean, I am a player that's took this to the last 2 regionals. I've day 2 the last 2 regionals with it. And I think that this is a pretty solid build. A lot of people know what Charizard's doing by now, and Charizard's a pretty linear deck. Its matchup spread is pretty well defined, but it's this particular build with Radiant Serena and Double Collapse is quite good against Lost Zone Box decks and Lugia decks is towards the top. So if we see a lot of the trends here, Lugia and Lost Zone Box decks are perceived as some of the best decks in format. A lot of decks are trying to beat them. So while Charizard might be positioned low based off of its previous rankings, it might be a better play this weekend if a lot of people play those decks or if you run into the right matchups. It's not a bad deck per se, and as decks like Lost Tina find themselves absent from this list, we might see Charizard EX rising to the top. Again, I think we're in a format where there's like 20 decks, and decks 11 through 20 are all kind of acceptable within the 6 through 20 range. So if you don't see a deck on this list, it probably is within the top 20 range, and it might have barely missed this list based off my own personal metrics that I do. I do want to put this out there that this is my own personal list. Charizard EX is just a solid deck, and I think a lot of the decks in this kind of 4 through 7 range are just generally solid picks. Might be able to spike a tournament, might not be as consistent as the top decks and formats. So we'll have to see how it goes, but Charizard is a great pick going forward, like any of the other decks on this list. Photon blasting its way into its number 6 spot is Miraidon EX. I think Miraidon EX might actually see a really good showing this weekend because a lot of the Ohio players, like Jesse Parker, they didn't play Sacramento as far as I was concerned. And the Miraidon absence was felt there. So we might see players from that general region playing more Miraidon if they decide to continue to do so. A lot of the modern lists are playing Luxray based off of Peoria's Mew grabber kind of take. Using Judge, Path, Luxray can be quite devastating to your opponents, and adding it to a lightning type deck is really cool. Miraidon, again, might be able to kind of have those solid matchups against a lot of decks that are not Lost Zone Box, and maybe you might be able to squeak out a win against a single Lost Zone Box deck in Toronto or so if you play a few of them. But as long as you avoid them, you could have a deep run with this deck. And sometimes that's all you need. It's not much more deep than that. We're in a format where you got to dodge some poor matchups. That's all it is. Shivering its way into number 5 is Chien-Pao with Baxcalibur. Now, this is a deck that is kind of slid off the rankings in previous weeks, and it's really on an upward trajectory. I wouldn't be surprised if Chien-Pao EX is the most underrated deck on this list, and the list that has been seeing success, Grant Shen's latest creation, just again made top 4 in Lille Regionals. So really the list is where it's at. We have a lot of top players co-signing this deck. So if you're looking for a little bit of a run hot deck that still has an opportunity to see success, I think Chien-Pao Baxcalibur really is that deck, having opportunities to beat almost any deck in formats. Might lose a little bit to Lost Zone Box, but this is really like, we have a defined list for this deck. Like, if you're playing a deck, you have to ask yourself, why am I not playing this exact list? That's not to say that you're forced to play any deck in particular, but the amount of success that's backing this list is fantastic. Ripping those energies from Baxcalibur onto your various Pokemon in play and going from there. So if you're looking for a solid run to maybe even win Toronto Regionals, I think Chien-Pao might be the play. Aqua storming its way into number 4 is Lost Zone Box Kyogre. Now, this deck has been at the top of our list for the past little bit, and I do want to kind of explain myself here. I think Turbo is a better Lost Zone Box deck right now because it has answers to Lugia and other top decks in the format, whereas Kyogre really has answers to a lot of other things, but doesn't really have an answer to Lost Zone Box itself. Now, Zamazenta kind of deals with that in some ways, but one Lost Vacuum, one Forest Steel Stone, like, you're probably slower than Mirror, and I feel like some other builds like Lost Zone Sablezard might end up being a little bit better in Mirror than this, or Turbo. Turbo kind of gives us the best of both worlds, so while you don't gain Kyogre, you do have other capabilities there. In this case, I put this list here because Azul peaked with it after Raymond 1 with Peoria. Peaked as in saw the best performance as a Lost Zone, or one of the best performances as a Lost Zone Kyogre player. I think going forward, we want to be playing a Raikou version of this build, maybe the week after Toronto. However, Zamazenta's success is quite good with Kyogre, so I don't see a reason not to play it. So right now, solid list, but I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Dragonite being a little bit better, or Raikou being a little bit better to kind of deal with things. Psychic embracing its way all the way to number 3 is Gardevoir. Gardevoir hasn't really changed too much in the past few weeks, and I could see some players maybe adding some new techs and stuff like this. We've seen Lumineon in and out of the deck, and I mean, there's ways for Gardevoir to nearly tech for whatever it wants. I think the biggest thing that holds Gardevoir back is the fact that it's a stage 2 deck, and it can still be inconsistent at times. It's the most inconsistently consistent deck, if that makes sense, where I think Gardevoir is the definition of a deck that might always be in the top 8s. You might just not be the player in top 8s. So as I think Gardevoir is quite good in our particular formats, I think, to me, this is kind of a deck that I'm kind of done chasing. The players who are seeing it are seeing quite a bit of success. So if you're a Gardevoir expert by now, keep on playing Gardevoir. That's really where I'd like to say. If you have not really picked up Gardevoir, maybe it's not the time to be picking up Gardevoir, because these players have been playing it since the release of Scarlet Violet, and have had kind of the cues from Tord to really not really change this deck in any capacity. Like, the deck is really where it's at. There's been a few kind of changes here and there, but reasonably Tord's list is Tord's list, and it's all based on that. So Gardevoir is really good. I don't really have any excuses to not play it, except I might not be as well practiced with Gardevoir as another Gardevoir player. If that's something that's holding you back as well, maybe pick one of the other decks on this list, because Gardevoir has layers of depth to it when it comes to strategy. But overall, very fantastic deck. Tempest diving all the way into our number 2 spot is Colorless Lugia. Now, Colorless Lugia has seen a lot of success in this particular format. Didn't really see the success it wanted to do at Peoria. Did really kind of crank it up at Sacramento. And I think it's like really well primed for Toronto. And we have the default like solid list now, where it's like, if I was playing this list, I think this is 59 cards correct, or 60 cards, or 58 cards correct. If I want to swap Luxray for Radiant Charizard, or maybe I want to add that in, like, we have a really good basis of a list here. One thing that I want to note is I like the 4 Gift Energy and 4 Boss that we saw coming out of the regionals this past weekend. I can't remember which player it was, but shout out to them for posting about it. I think having 4 Gift, 4 Boss just sounds great in this deck, alongside having all the other regular fixings when it comes to a Lugia deck. Not really a lot of bad matchups here, and a lot of good matchups. You probably want to avoid Miraidon and Charizard, and everything else seems pretty good. So if you're looking for a deck that's, it might be a little bit boring, but it's a good deck to kind of go on a deep run with, Lugia Colorless is probably that deck. I also really like the Lugia Single Strike build that is not on this list, so I do want to point that out, that I think that build is also really acceptable for this weekend, and I always think is Single Strike better. So Lugia, similar to Arc decks, are kind of interchangeable in a lot of ways, so think about that when it comes down to it. However, I'd probably err on the safe side and play Lugia Colorless. Dragon Galing its way into #1 spot on this list is Turbo Lawson Box. Now, I try not to foreshadow too much or give too many hints because I like these videos to honestly be kind of surprising in ways and where it's like, oh, we read it and we didn't know exactly, but I feel like I gave it off a little bit too much this week. So sorry if you were trying to anticipate that. And if you're surprised at this #1 deck, then you're welcome, I guess. I don't know. I think that this particular build, taking some inspiration from Andrew Hedrick's run at the Late Night Series, swapping out their list to add in a Mew for another card that I think they had. I'm not entirely sure what it was. It might have been Ditto. Or actually, I think it was Third Sableye that they had. I think that this is just an ideal build for this list, where Pidgeot gives you the flexibility to not put it down a 2-prizer, so you can play as a single prize card deck while still going aggressive against other Lost Zone box decks. You have all the tools that are necessary for most decks in the format, so if you want to play a Lost Zone box deck, I think this one's just the best way. I'd rather be playing Raikou against a Lugia deck than playing a Kyogre. I'd rather be playing Dragonite against an Arceus deck than playing a Kyogre. There's a lot of really cool things when it comes down to this build, and if you don't have all these cards, again, I do urge you to pick up from AtlasTCG.com, DecoGaming.ca, and PTCGO using all the discounts available in our description. But in all everything, like, this to me is like just a fine crafted Lost Zone box list, and if this is how we finish off the 151 format with it, I'm all about it. This just seems like a very solid play for Toronto if you're looking towards it. Yeah, there's going to be some Lost Zone box hate, but Lost Zone box decks usually are the ones that find ways to kind of squeeze out of these situations. So solid list here. But yeah, that's what we got going on for our #1 deck. Let me know in the comments if you agree with it or not. Let me close things out. And that's what we got going on for this video today. Hopefully you enjoyed watching this and learning from these top 10 best decks. I'm excited to be at Toronto Regionals this weekend. There's going to be a cup on Thursday in Mississauga at the Upper Hand if you haven't got a chance. I posted on Twitter so you could register for that, or you can check out their website. Quick Google search there. And I'll be at the main event Friday, Saturday, and hopefully Sunday as well, as long as I make day 2. I really like making these videos for the community, and I hope that you all love this stuff. We've been doing some Paradox Rift content this week as well, because I know a lot of people are excited about that. So a lot of really great content. Check it out. If you haven't got a chance to check out our Patreon, check out our patreon.com/TSSWin for exclusive content such as articles, lists, videos, all that great stuff. That being said, I do got a jet, so if you haven't already, give this video a like. Thank you so much for watching to this point, and I'll catch up with all y'all later. Peace out and have a great one. Hey trainers, tired of having too many cards lying around? I know that feeling, and I know what a hassle it is to try and sell those cards. But selling bulk is now easier than ever with TCG Bulk. Find tons of potential buyers in a single place. You just download the app, look for the best buyer near you, and carefully pack your bulk, ship it, and you get paid. It really is that simple. Turn the cards you don't want into the cards you absolutely need for your next deck. You made it to the end. Thank you so much for watching this entire video from the Shuffle Squad. Honestly, from the bottom of our hearts, we appreciate each and every person that supports our content, watches what we have going on every single day, every single week, even from time to time, and continuously allows us to have a forum to project our creative content towards the Pokemon TCG community. So if you haven't already, be sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and even leave a comment to help boost the YouTube algorithm. That being said, we'll catch you with our next video. Thanks again. Take it easy.